And on today's episode of Better Than a Lecture, we're here with Dr. Robert Lipton, who is a Nicholson Professor of Mathematics, and he's got a lot of very interesting research to talk about. And the first thing we wanted to ask him about was his work involving the equations with math that go the solids into the liquids and colors, and I forget what all it was. It sounded like either active camouflage or some kind of weapon, or I have no idea what it is. Can you tell us about this?
Certainly, yes. So I'm interested in mathematics as it applies to new technologies. So we're interested in refractive surfaces, and what that means is you got radiation coming in at some angle, and then you want to bounce it at a certain desired angle, and maybe change some property of that incoming radiation to, for example, cause a switch to occur. So we're looking at all optical circuits. Such things would be great if they can be made, because you save so much weight. Instead of using electric wires and copper wires everywhere, you're just using fiber optics, or you're just using thin air itself, and you're propagating and doing switching. And so this can be of use to next generation computers, information processing, faster internet, you name it. So how do I go about it? Well, there's some perfectly good equations that have been around for about 150 years that really work, and they still work, and they're still finding new stuff out about them. And so that's what I do. I find new stuff about equations, and in particular, Maxwell's equations, or the equations that control light. And although they were derived, 150 years ago, maybe, and perfected, say, 100 years ago, they're the go-to equations. They describe reality so well that we can mine them for information about reality. Now, you would say that's impossible. Things don't work that way. Well, they do. And what's great is when I teach courses, people spin up. They may not know anything. They may know, high school mathematics, and by the time in 2 years, 3 years are done, they know Maxwell's equations. How is that possible? I mean, it's possible. Humans, we're pretty good at this sort of thing. We're pretty plastic. And in 3 years, you could spin up from knowing nothing to something, and actually then designing plasmonic devices, which we use a lot. And so I could go into that, but plasmonic devices, metamaterials, maybe you've heard of these things. All these exotic optical materials come straight from Maxwell's equations. There's no nothing up my sleeve here. We're just looking at pen and paper and figuring it out. And the fact that it's possible is actually magic. I mean, somehow we got inside information somehow through math that tells us about nature. The language is completely different than what you would think, and sometimes everyday experience is not good initially to explain everything, and then finally, once you understand it, everyday language is perfect to explain it. So that what happens is I'm a sort of a translator, unlocking equations and turning it into the English language, and that other people can build things with.
Now, you said plasmonic devices and metamaterials.
Yes.
What are those?
So a metamaterial is a structured material where the structure is on a length scale lower than the wavelength of light that it will control. And the way wavelength of light works is in materials is it's a wave, okay? And basically it's a electric field, and it causes in charged particles a force, either pushing it away or pulling it towards. So things go back and forth like a ball on a string, the simple harmonic oscillator, they call it. Anyway, when a wave hits a material, it causes all the particles in the electron, particles in the material, that are charged, to go one way or the other way. And it's kind of like a Rube Goldberg effect. Those particles go one way and then the other way. They cause the neighboring particles to go one way and the other way. And this wave propagates through the material. And you can control these waves. Well, at some frequencies, you can control a structured material such that these waves will hit a structure and get inside and resonate inside there, like a flute. When you blow wind across a flute, you get a resonance. Well, what the heck? I mean, you got electromagnetic waves in structured materials. Same thing happens. Only this time it's on a nanoscale. Okay, so these resonances occur on a nanoscale, and then you can use them to control light on, say, 100 nanometers, okay, which is visible light. And so you use these material resonances to control the incoming wavelength at a higher length scale. And these are now being put to great use. There were the photonic materials where you would also have a scattering. So there, the structure of the material is such that it'll have scatterers roughly the same wavelength of light, and collectively they'll either scatter it everywhere so a signal doesn't get through, or they'll scatter it so the signal will reinforce itself and get through. So those are photonic devices, and they can steer energy in different directions. Whereas the metamaterials are, in a way, using what is called a plasmonic resonance, which is a resonance which is on the size of, let us say, nanometers, subscale. And so these patterns will take advantage of these plasmonic resonances. Now, you may say, well, what do we, great, that's all very exotic and everything, but give me an example. And I'll say, okay, go to church. You look at stained glass. Okay, stained glass has nano-sized particles. They were generated by smoke, and they smoke this glass and they turn it into stained glass. So what you see is you see white light coming from the outside sun, and all of a sudden on the inside you see various colors. Well, that color is a result of the collective plasmonic resonance of all those nanoparticles. So stained glass has been around a while, and that's an example of a plasmonic material where you're able to control light of a certain wavelength by a substructured material. And how you control it and how you quantify it so that you can tell somebody to build it is the equations. The mathematical equations do that for you.